Welcome to the Atlantico podcast, where we talk about the science behind the Atlantico project, the Atlantic Ocean, and the human adventures experienced along the way. Here, we have conversations with guests from around the world who work together so that we can better understand, manage, and protect the ocean. So let's embark on the journey of Atlantico and discover the world that lies above and beneath the surface of the beautiful Atlantic Ocean. Today we have another episode of our Atlantic Ocean series, where we discover a region of the Atlantic and the work that we have done there. I have the pleasure to speak with Emma Rocke, who was a chief scientist on board of Tara during one of the sampling studies of mission microbiomes. And she will tell us about her experience and explain what scientific questions the team has been tackling while they were at sea. Welcome to the podcast, Emma. I'm so excited to discover another region of the Atlantic with you today.
Thanks, Eloise. Thanks for having me.
Before we go deep into the topic of today's episode, I would love to get to know you and to understand when and how your connection with the ocean started, what your story and your journey has been to get to what you do today.
Okay, so I'll try and keep that brief. It's rather a long story. But I suppose my original passion started when I was very young. I was lucky enough to grow up in rural Canada next to a lake. So it's one of those picturesque, stereotypical pictures you would think of when you think of the Canadian landscape. And we grew up on that lake. We had a sailboat, so I was a very keen sailor. I also, as I grew up, I noticed that the quality of this lake degraded very quickly in front of my eyes, and due to a lack of enforcement of local policy, the quality of that lake degraded, and it made me sad. It was our sort of playground growing up, and it led me to, when I went to university, to attempt to become a professional or an expert in learning how to mitigate these sorts of problems. So my journey very much started in the freshwater domain. I did my honors degree on that lake, looking at copepods, comparing to other lakes. And I was hooked. And looking under the microscope was amazing for me. It piqued a curiosity on top of just learning how to mitigate and learn about water quality. It also hooked my interest as far as biodiversity and water bodies. So that led to a master's degree in Europe, where I learned about environmental policy and biology, trying to decipher and learn how to turn all of this research into policy and communicate it to politicians who typically are not scientists. So that was interesting. I learned a lot of law, economics, as well as biology, environmental technology. I then took a bit of a break. Lehman Brothers crashed, so jobs were not right at that stage. I should say I was born in Hong Kong. We have a sort of second home there. So I ended up there, met my PhD supervisor. Water quality there, as you can imagine, is a bit degraded as well. And that's where I ended up in the marine environment, learning about hypoxic zones because of eutrophication. So lots of nutrients in the water causing fish deaths. And that was the focus of my PhD. And so that's how I ended up. Like I said, I'm in South Africa now. So another jump. Finished my PhD, met my future husband who had a job in South Africa. He tried to drag me there, and I said, I'm not going to go unless I can find some work. So we came for a holiday here. I discovered very quickly that it was a very appealing place to come and work and study marine biology. We have 3 oceans on our back door. And very quickly found a postdoc where I could start the work on the Benguela upwelling. So that landed me here and with Atlantico.
Brilliant. So today we are here to discover about your experience during one of the scientific studies of mission microbiomes of the Tara Ocean Foundation. You went on board of Tara in Cape Town in South Africa and then disembarked in Walvis Bay in Namibia. And so, to start with, can you tell us a little bit about what is specific about that region, what scientific questions we were trying to address during that leg of the expedition, why it is important to study those aspects, and how it will contribute to increasing our knowledge of the Atlantic Ocean. So a lot of big questions.
So we focused on the Benguela upwelling region. That was the big focus. And I suppose the big question was, what does the microbiome look like, the marine microbiome look like in the Benguela upwelling? So an upwelling is when you have winds coming from a certain direction. In this case, it's the southeast, pushes the surface waters away, and you get these deep, nutrient-rich waters come to the surface, creates a lot of productivity. So it's very important to know what's going on in these areas, certainly in a climate change context, right? Not many, we're busy developing biogeochemical models of this area, and there's no genomic or microbiome data constraining these models. So ultimately, that was the big question, what is happening? In South Africa, we've started to look a little bit at the microbiome. And it's important to understand as well, the southern Benguela is split into two. So we have the Luderitz upwelling cell at Luderitz that splits it. It's a very, very strong upwelling cell. We have the northern Benguela upwelling north of that, and we have the southern Benguela upwelling south of that, and they're two completely different systems. So comparing those two systems is important as well, right? In the south, it's a seasonal phenomenon. We have those strong winds only in the summertime. In Namibia, it's year-round. So already you can understand that there's probably a very, very big difference between the two. Moving on from that, this great productivity is great, but then you have these excess blooms and excess algae that when they die in the water column, so they sink a little bit, they will absorb a lot of oxygen out of the water. If you have a lot of blooms, then there's only so much oxygen in the water, and eventually you end up with no oxygen in the water. As you could imagine, this isn't great for local wildlife. You end up compressing the usable part of the water column. So fish either swim away if they're lucky, and a lot of times they die and wash up offshore, which is what we're seeing. We saw a lot of that this year. In South Africa, we got massive lobster walkouts and deaths. And in Namibia, there were a lot of fish deaths. And with climate change, as the ocean warms up, you're going to have less oxygen. The capability to hold on to oxygen in the water obviously declines as the temperature increases. So this is a concern for us. So we were on the hunt for OMZs, which we did find. So those are oxygen minimum zones, and sample them. So not only is it sucking oxygen out of the water, but when they run out of oxygen, they start absorbing nitrogen. And nitrogen is needed for phytoplankton to grow. So that's a problem as well. So that usable nitrogen is then being taken out of the water column and ejected out of the water column as greenhouse gases. So that's another concern for us. So all of these things are big question marks. These greenhouse gases could be going out into the atmosphere. There are also microbes that break down these greenhouse gases. It could be fine. But these are all very new discoveries that we've only really discovered, and protocols that we only really discovered in the last year or so. So properly understanding on the microbiome level what is happening is really important. So that was our big question. Obviously, we hit the Orange River as well. So looking at the Orange River plume, how that's affecting productivity, looking at microplastics. Are there any in the water? And Tara is great. They've got all these protocols on board, so we're able to have a look at that. We also sampled it off the Namib Desert. There's a lot of aerial transport there, so we're interested to see if that's affecting productivity. And then we went all the way up almost to the Angola border, just north of Walvis Bay. There's a Walvis Ridge where there's a little bit of less upwelling there. That was our control station. We were very lucky. We hit all those different features, different stages of upwelling. We found many OMZs, lucky or unlucky, depending on how you look at it.
Yeah, lucky for the scientists, but unlucky for the life trying to survive there.
Exactly. So it went well.
Excellent. So lots and lots of different activities, lots of different features studied. And I guess that leads me to the next question into how was this specifically studied on board? What did you have to do? And what will happen next with those samples and data?
So on board, Terra is very unique. It's literally a floating laboratory, and there are dozens of protocols per day that we did. I was very interested in not just putting my blinders on and looking at one specific fraction of the microbiome, very interested in looking at the whole size spectrum. It is a micro food web after all, so we focused on everything from viruses all the way up to jellyfish. And the idea is to get a comprehensive, holistic picture of what's happening in the water column and not just a specific feature. And we managed to cover all of those. As far as strategy goes, there was a lot of research that went into the project beforehand. We put transects together. So for each feature, we had 3 stations. We had an inshore station, which is as defined, it's just offshore, so very shallow, looking to see what's happening right next to the land. We had an on-shelf, so as the water moves offshore, the nutrients are stripped off a bit, and we had a shelf sample as well. And they went off-shelf, offshore to see what's happening further down the line after upwelling. So then we have a sort of gradient of nutrients and organisms that we looked at each transect. So a lot of research went into that. We're looking where people have sampled before, so we can build on that. Looking at other data as well, so that we made sure that we hit all the right features. And then it was a matter of getting up every day and doing it, which we did.
And now all of that is going to get distributed to the different labs?
Correct. Right. So those samples are still on board Tara. They will come off Tara in Dakar in Senegal, where they will be distributed to many, many different labs, both in Europe and South Africa, and they'll be processed from there.
We'll have to wait quite a few months before we can actually find out everything that you sampled and who was in the water, where, and what they were doing. So each of the scientific studies of the expedition is dedicated to a woman involved in marine sciences. And in this case, it was dedicated to Leslie Shackleton. Can you tell us a little bit about her, who she was, and her contribution to the field of marine sciences?
I can. So Leslie Shackleton was a mentor to a lot of my mentors. She sadly passed away a few years ago of cancer, but she really was a catalyst as far as empowering women in Africa, not just in South Africa, but all of Africa. So she started off in geology, marine geology at UCT, where she became a research assistant to her mentor there. But then she decided, I think she became very interested in marine science, and certainly in Benguela, I wanted to do a bit more there. So she coordinated the Benguela Ecology program, which is a huge collaborative effort to bring together scientists in South Africa from all different domains in order to study these resources, which are obviously so important to the African people. So her influence there was very much as a mentor to women, both in South Africa. She then, I think that became her passion. So she's opened a HERS chapter I think it started off in Cape Town or in South Africa only. So HERS is Higher Education Resource Services in South Africa. So this is an organization, there are chapters all over the world. There was no chapter in Africa at all until Leslie came along, and she founded that, and it just grew. So it's empowering women to do more and become part of higher education and, chase their dreams and not be afraid to chase their dreams. This is something that she was integral in founding. And there is now a whole Africa chapter based on her initiative. So she was very driven, very motivating individual that influenced a lot of my mentors, because I never had the privilege of meeting her. But hopefully you get Jeff online and he can tell you a bit more about her.
Yeah, we really hope to have her husband on an episode who can tell us about this very inspiring woman. I can't wait to hear more about her for sure. And to end today's episode, I'd like to talk to you about more about your personal experience on board Tara. Can you share what it was like for you? About your life on board, the memories you've brought back from that region of the Atlantic, and of course all the people that you shared the journey with.
Oh, I'd love to. Tara is a very special boat. I think those of us that have been on her realize that. She's got a sort of energy all of her own, and maybe that's just from living on her for 5 weeks. And the people certainly contribute to that. But it would it was very special for me. And also the fact that she's a sailboat. It's a bit of an oxymoron nowadays that we take these great big ships and we guzzle all sorts of petrol in order to save the ocean. I feel like, oof. And, we drifted up the Benguela current to sample the Benguela current. We did a little bit of motoring. We used up 10,000 liters of petrol, which is really not very much considering how far we went. We sailed. And for me, that meant a lot for me as well, from that side. And as well, we're 14 people on a 36-meter boat on these bigger ships. You're very much separated from the crew. The crew does their bit and the scientists do their bit. And there's never any interaction between the two. And it's very much a family on board Tara. So we have our jobs that we do during the day, but we did literally become a family by the end of it. We all ate our meals together. We have our routines on board. So there's lunch service, there's lunch dishes, dinner service, cleaning. You're part of every aspect of running that boat and getting the job done at the end of the day. And for me, it became a very special experience for sure. And everyone was so motivated. It was long days on board. We're up before dawn just because there's so many protocols and we don't want to be up late at night. And didn't matter how seasick they were, everyone got up and did their job, which was really inspiring for me. So it was a dream team on board. And it wouldn't have been possible without any of them working together the way they did.
Amazing. And maybe more like a little personal interest. How was it? I guess you saw the Namibian desert, and how was that experience?
It was surreal, especially having been not seen much land for a while, because we did stay offshore for a bit because the weather was going to get bad. And we came in and seeing these just huge. Namib desert is sand dunes. It's not just a desert. It's these massive sand dunes. They're just so impressive. And you get this fog as well. So it was very surreal. And in the fog, I mean, obviously there's all this life. So that we had whales, we had pods of pilot whales that spent a whole day just hanging out next to us, which was amazing. We had families of seals that would chase our rosette down and up again. It was surreal, like I said. And you look with your binoculars on land and there were no people. There were no roads. It was just sand dunes and fog and wildlife. So it was amazing.
That sounds amazing. Wow.
It was, yeah.
Yeah, and I hope we will see the pictures and the film from that leg soon. Hopefully it will be out when the podcast comes out, so we can I can put the link here in the show notes, because you were on board not that long ago, a few weeks ago.
Exactly, yeah.
But hopefully we'll have the images back soon enough. And I guess I have to really thank you today for your time and sharing your experience with us. It's amazing to hear from the life on board. Every time we discover a new region through the eyes and through the voice of somebody that's been on board, and it's really inspiring. So thank you so much for sharing that with us today, Emma.
Thanks, Eloise. Thanks for having me.
We hope that you've enjoyed today's episode and look forward to seeing you next time. You can follow the Atlantico project on our website on www.atlantico.eu, and you can also find us on Twitter, Instagram and Facebook. All the links and information on the project and on today's episode is in the show notes. Atlantico is a project funded under Horizon 2020, a European Union research and innovation programme.